Hello teachers, I just wanted to put together a quick screencast for you around learning progressions, as you can see here. Just want to give you some of the basic ideas around learning progressions. I've had a lot of questions come to me around what they are and how we use them, and I know we're all in different places, but I just wanted to give everyone a big overview of some of the ideas. So here we have a learning progression. With Principles a couple months ago, we designed a learning progression of learning progressions. So that standard / goal at the top there is completely made up as a way to design a learning progression around what a learning progression is. So I'll go through all the major components again with another one, but just to show you the standard or goal, that would be like your Common Core standards or your state adopted standards, and then you design a progression around that standard with the standard or goal as the level 3. So basically I took this goal and kind of put it into bullet point format with a little more specificity, and then the 1 and the 2 are the building blocks to getting to the 3, and the 4 is above and beyond. So hopefully by the end of this presentation, which will be no longer than 15 minutes because that's all I get with screencast, you will be at a level 3. So that would mean you would be able to design a learning progression, that you would be able to embed it in your instruction, and that it would reflect a pathway of skills and knowledge. You may have seen learning progressions before. Many of you have this Handbook for Art and Science of Teaching by Marzano. Last year, principals bought those for staff. I've also encouraged some people to read the Popham text. Chapter 2 is on the Curriculum Office Weebly, so it's kind of illegally uploaded, that whole copyright thing. But if you want to see Chapter 2, there is a copy there that you can look at. Just to go through, what is a learning progression, like the purpose of it. So a learning progression, and this is the Popham model, so you can tell it's not in the boxes like we've been working with. Popham isn't big into the table, but it's the same idea that we have a target curricular aim. In this case it's often content, but it can be skill or content, and then it's a sequence of sub-skills and enabling knowledge that moves students from the beginning of your lesson through to where they reach the target. I've had people ask, do I need a different scale for every day? I don't think you do. As you design your units and design your learning targets, some learning targets will span multiple days, some may span an entire unit, so it really depends on what you're planning for. And we'll go through a unit so I can kind of show you what that looks like. So again, the general components, we looked at these earlier with the one that we designed around learning progressions, but you'll notice that this has the unit that it's a part of. It has the 3.0, this would be proficiency, the level 3. A 4.0 is above and beyond. The 1 and the 2 are what kind of happens between the beginning of the lesson and the level 3. Now this format is really typical of a Marzano learning progression or scale. What I've noticed with the Marzano scales is they use language like with help, partial understanding, partial knowledge, no major errors, and there's these half steps between. As you design your scales, I personally have found more luck by being more specific with what a 1 looks like. So notice this one says with help, a partial understanding of some of the simpler details. I usually am more specific about what that means. What are the simpler details, or what are some of the processes? But this is just to show you in general what it looks like, a level 1, a level 2, a level 3. And you'll notice, I've put this over here, taxonomy. Some of you received a laminated kind of fold thingy from your principal. It looks like this over here in the right-hand corner. That has a taxonomy chart that has all these different verbs and processes and what it would look like for a student to be operating at that level of taxonomy. And the intent of that is to match it with this idea of the scale, that if a level 3 is a describe, then a level 2 should be lower on the taxonomy scale. And here it is, it's recognizes or recalls. and then a level 1 is with help, does those things. So what we should see on a scale is a level 1, and a level 2, and a level 3, where you see an ascending complexity of taxonomy. But you want to start with the level 3. You always start with your standard. This standard is describe the water cycle and give local examples of where parts of the water cycle can be seen. That verb, you can't change that verb. That is the standard. So if your standard, if your level 3 is identify, I don't know, types of rock or something, I assume that's a thing, that identify stays at a level 3. You can't make it more complicated. It just is. So your level 2 and your level 1 will probably be identify with help or identify different subsets of content. So keep in mind the taxonomic level of your standard is what your level 3 needs to be. And I encourage you to work with your grade level teams or your departments to talk through your standards and make sure you're in agreement about what the taxonomic level is for each standard. So I want to show you this. We'll revisit it again at the end, towards the end of the presentation. But this is something I made with a team I was working with around the instructional cycle. So we, in our grade levels or in our departments, often work on content, and it never really feels like we're done. We're revisiting all the time. But what I wanted you to notice on this is, we often start by identifying our skills and targets and then what it looks like if they're proficient. And then we develop the process of how they go from the beginning of the unit to reaching the target. So where it says you are here, that's what we're focusing on today, is just this one bubble in the whole process. So I'd be happy to go through the whole process at some point if you are interested. For now, though, we're focusing just on this develop the process / learning progression to support students in reaching the targets. So keep in mind that this learning progression is meant to be embedded in a much larger cycle. It's like one tree in a very large forest of instructional development. So when you're thinking about your assessments and both your formative and summative assessments and your instructional choices and all your strategies, this is just one component of that larger conversation. So I went through with this 4th grade teacher I know in Dimondale. This would be, I believe, chapter 6 of Go Math, and we kind of practiced this process, what it would look like with math. And we went through the beginning of the chapter. It has the standards that are addressed, and some of them, it's like the whole standard is the bulk of the chapter, and then there's little pieces of other standards. So we put in there the specific content based on the standards that were listed in the chapter. And then from that, we tried to look at what are the priority standards, what is the big chunk, what are we really looking for in this unit. So the standards are identified for us, but not every standard is the heart or spirit of that chapter. So one thing we thought about is making sure our priority standards really aligned with what's on the report card. So not every single standard, there's lots of standards are listed. A lot of the legwork done by our colleagues has narrowed down on the report card the specific priority standards for us. So I would just make sure there's a connection, that you have a scale for pretty much everything on the report card, and that might be a helpful way to identify priority standards. Once we identified our priority standards and we put those in here, we then thought about what do kids need to be able to do to get there, and what would it look like if they could go above and beyond. I will ask that you be, gracious with us. This was our first go at the Chapter 6 unit, and we worked on this Monday on our snow day. And so it was just our initial thinking. We had 2 priority standards. I wasn't sure, do we need to make 2 scales or 1? We looked at the standard a lot to figure out, what is it asking students to do. And I keep reminding all teachers on this that you're going to revise these scales all the time. So don't be afraid, just make the scale, see how it goes. And then you can always revise it. It's not, permanent. But you do want to keep in mind that students are going to see these. So, or they should see these, right? So you can kind of tell them, this is where you are moving towards, the learning target. So it helps them see the pathway. So writing it in student-friendly language is helpful. Then we moved into the development of the unit itself, and we used the same Launch, Explore, Summary processes that the CMP uses, but it still matches the Go Math structure. And what's important here is we stuck with the Go Math curriculum. So even though we're designing a scale and we're kind of writing these lesson plans, we did not look outside of the curriculum for materials. The curriculum has all the materials we need, but what we did is we looked at when could we formatively assess to see where students are with the scales. So the formative assessments are color-coded to match the scale. So the scale I just showed you, level 1 is this pinkish purple color, level 2 is the green, level 3 is the yellow. And then we've structured the unit. So at the end of the unit, there's when students, some of the students may have already achieved a level 3, there's some enrichment activities developed for the level 4 students. All right, so now that we've gone through the unit, we've done identify skill and/or content targets. We've determined what proficiency would look like. We've developed the process or learning progression. We've developed the summative assessment, although for Go Math, the test is already designed for us. We have planned to formatively assess. And then finally, we're developing our instructional strategies. That's kind of that idea of what the Launch Explore Summary would look like in action. So that's the gist of the learning progression. I hope that I've made clear the why is just kind of this progression from the beginning of the unit to the target. The basic components being a level 3 is the standard, 4 is above, that you have taxonomy that increases as you move up the scale. Hopefully that there is some clarity on how you might use this with students. I think them knowing kind of where they are on the path can be helpful, and even doing some self-assessment can be helpful. So that's just a brief overview. Feel free to call, email, ask questions, and we'll continue doing this work together. Thanks for listening.